is a villain so evil, so sinister, so horribly vile, that even the utterance of his name strikes fear into the hearts of men. The only safe way to refer to this King of Darkness is simply him.
Puff-Shroom, probably one of the most cost-efficient plants in PvZ2 as it literally costs 0 sun, but there's a couple of drawbacks that come with this. Number 1, it only has a shooting distance of 3 tiles, and number 2, it has a lifespan of 60 seconds, meaning after that 60 seconds is up, it will fade away. So I thought, could it solo the entire game if it was max level and had tremendous stat boosts even in the face of impossibilities? Well, let's find out. But before we begin, let me tell you all the rules. Only Puff-Shroom, no power or Zen Garden, skip all levels that force the use of another plant, pre-placed plants are fine, and lastly, coins earned throughout the challenge can be used to buy plant food, but no replaying levels to farm coins. Oh, and about 91% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Okay, let's begin. Puff-Shroom is assumed to be a pretty bad plant, but at max level, it's actually insanely strong and one of the best plants that we used in these challenges. And it was actually so easy that Ancient Egypt and Pirate Seas kind of just went by quickly and weren't much of a challenge, so here's all of the levels at once. And while these levels play out, let me quickly go over the max level Puff-Shroom stats. Its recharge goes from 5 seconds to 2.5 seconds. Its health goes from 150 to 700. Its damage goes from 20 to 110, plus that boost from the max mastery. Its projectile velocity, so how fast its attacks fly through the air, has a 2.2x boost. Its plant food power damage goes from 20 to 30, and that's per shot. And a pretty important aspect of the max mastery is the 20% chance for the Puff-Shroom to plant food whenever planted. And this is especially important for Puff-Shroom because when it plant foods, all the other Puff-Shroom plant food with it and the lifespan of it resets. And on the topic of lifespan, the other very important upgrade that happens with it being max level is that the lifespan goes from 60 seconds to 120 seconds, which is honestly pretty crazy. And stats aside, we had now beaten all of Ancient Egypt and Pirate Seas using just a max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, the Wild West, a world which is pretty similar to Ancient Egypt and Pirate Seas until a certain zombie is introduced. So due to this, days 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7 are all pretty easily beaten. Day 10, however, introduces the Chicken Wrangler and the chickens, which I was not prepared for at all. So this chicken in the top middle lane and the very top lane got all the way to the lawnmowers, taking them with them. And that showed me that one column of Puff-Shrooms is definitely not going to be enough for the chickens, so I added a second one right after. But my main weapon against the chickens was definitely the plant food power up, because it's literally OP as it plant foods all of them at once, absolutely destroying all the chickens. And as the final wave came in, we basically won because it doesn't contain any chickens or chicken wranglers. Day 11 had a 500 sun limit, but of course the Puff-Shroom doesn't cost anything, so I quickly spammed 2 columns of them and very easily beat the level. 13, no special challenges either. Day 14, the chickens returned, so my plan was just planting as many Puff-Shroom as I could before they came in. And I started in the very back column because that allowed me to stall for time. And in doing this, I was actually able to get down 4 columns of Puff-Shroom before the first chicken wrangler even came in. And it doesn't matter how many chickens get sent in, they're not getting through all these Puff-Shroom. And if they did bite at the Puff-Shrooms or ate one, I'd either just plant food to regain the health back or just plant another Puff-Shroom in the one that was eaten's place. And the level ended with me having 5 columns of Puff-Shroom down. Day 15 actually has a pretty scary challenge in which I can't lose more than 2 plants. And it's not really the zombies that you have to worry about in this level, it's more so the lifespan of the Puff-Shroom. But thankfully, we're given a pretty generous amount of plant food throughout the level, so I can just use those to retain its lifespan. And in doing so, day 15 was easily beat. Day 16, we had to protect this walnut, and I chose to just use 3 columns of Puff-Shroom right behind the walnut, because any more than that is kind of pointless, because the range is of course still only 3 tiles. And the walnut was successfully defended. Day 17, we have to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and this level doesn't have any scary zombies. zombies, so we're able to accomplish our goal. Day 19 has a 2000 sun limit, which isn't a challenge of course, but it also has that challenge of me not being able to lose more than 2 plants. But the plant food just seems extra generous on these levels because I was using it throughout the entire level, but still ended with 5 in my bank. Day 21, we have to protect the flowers from being trampled on, also again with a 1750 sun limit, and again no dangerous zombies, so the requirements were easily met. Day 23 however is a problem because we have to protect the flowers from being trampled on, and also we can't lose more than 2 plants, but this level also has chicken wranglers. So once again I was using the strategy to place as many Puff-Shroom as I could before taking out any of the zombies, and I got down 4 columns of them before the chicken wranglers were sent in. But even with this many, I had to make sure that I was constantly plant fooding whenever I saw any chickens, because all the zombies needed to do was take out 3 of my Puff-Shroom and I would lose. And if you look in the bottom lane, you'll see that if I'm not on timing, the chickens will eat through my Puff-Shroom. And as we're about to reach the final wave, I was kind of just spamming my plant food because I had 3 in my bank. And as the final wave came in, I used my plant food, basically taking out most of the chickens, and the remainders were defeated by the rest, and we beat day 23. And now we're on day 24, which is the last level we play of the Wild West, and we have to protect these 3 walnuts on these 3 minecarts. And in fear of the chickens, I was once again using the stalling strategy and trying to place down as many Puff-Shrooms as I could before they came in. And by the time the first one was sent in, I had 3 columns of Puff-Shroom down, but of course I still had to make sure that I was constantly using my plant food, otherwise the chickens would just eat through everything. And of course with some consistency, we're able to defeat the entire level, beating day 24, and now all of the Wild West using just a max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, the Frostbite Caves, another world that has a singular threat in the form of its icy winds. And day 1 doesn't have these, so we breeze through it. Day 2 does have them, and some of my Puff-Shroom end up getting frozen, and the way to counteract this is just placing another Puff-Shroom behind the frozen one to break the ice. And the winds on day 2 weren't enough to overwhelm my Puff-Shroom, so we beat it pretty easily. Day 4, again, nothing too overwhelming, so we're able to defeat it using minimal Puff-Shrooms. Day 6 was definitely more of a challenge because my front row Puff-Shrooms got frozen, and then right after breaking the ice on those, the Puff-Shroom in the back column got frozen, so I had to plant more behind those to break their ice as well. But even through all that, day 6 was still defeated. Day 7, the winds weren't too overwhelming, but even then I placed a lot of Puff-Shroom just in case, defeating it pretty easily. Day 9, again, minimal Puff-Shrooms. Day 11 is definitely a level with a hefty amount of winds, so as the Puff-Shroom started getting frozen, I started placing more behind them, and in doing so, a pretty good chunk of the map was covered in Puff-Shroom by the time the final wave arrived. And you've probably guessed we beat this level as well, but a pretty interesting thing is that if you look in the top left, you'll see that I have 1000 sun even though the Puff-Shroom costs 0. And I really tried not collecting any sun, but I literally couldn't break the habit, so you'll see me collecting it here and there basically in every level. But of course, aside from that, day 11 was beat. And now we have to skip straight to day 13 because even though normally we do play day 12 because it's a prepare your defenses level, it doesn't actually allow us to bring in the Puff-Shroom since it's a 0 cost plan. And that's why you haven't seen any prepare your defenses levels because I literally just can't play them, so we end up skipping them for this plan. In day 13, we have to protect these flowers in the very back from being trampled on, and the only problem is the Gargantuar in the bottom lane that's sent within the final wave, and the Yeti imps it throws right near the flowers, but I did have a Puff-Shroom there just to defeat him, and I planted one behind just in case as well. And after taking him out, day 13 was beat. Day 15, we have these pepper pults to help us with unfreezing the Puff-Shroom if they get frozen, but it doesn't work out too well because of the Puff-Shroom's small range. So the idea here was planting a column of Puff-Shroom in that 4th column from the front, and then also Puff-Shroom in the range of the pepper pults and also in range to break the ice from that column of Puff-Shroom in the front if they got frozen. And honestly, it was a good system that was working pretty well, and the only lane that we had to worry about was the very middle one because there weren't any pepper pults to de-thaw the plants there. And in doing this, day 15 was defeated pretty easily. Day 17, nothing too bad either. Same with 19 and 20 with no special challenges. 22, however, we have to be a little careful because similar to the chicken wranglers, we're introduced to the weasel zombies, but there aren't too many sent, so we're able to just use our plant food to take care of most of them and beat the level without losing any lawnmowers. Day 23, we have to protect these chard guards in the back, and again, the weasels are in the level, and it got semi-close with this chard guard in the very top lane because it lost all of its flaps, but then I was able to get down a Puff-Shroom that instantly plant fooded, taking out the weasels there. But then a windstorm carrying a cone head got sent right onto that charred guard, and realizing that the charred guard wasn't going to survive, I chose to just use a plant food on it, which took care of the problem. And the rest of day 23 was defeated without difficulty. Day 26 has 4 flags and can be a little tricky because of the 3 frozen weasel hoarders in the very front, but of course my plan was just to spam Puff-Shroom in the very back to prepare for them, but this almost ended up backfiring on me because most of my Puff-Shroom in the top 2 lanes got frozen by the winds. But thankfully, as the final wave came in, I still had a couple of tiles to work with in the front, so I made use of those and plant food to take care of all the zombies, beating day 26. Day 27 has 4 flags and also these 3 rotobega in the back that we have to protect, but this level doesn't have any windstorms, so it's just straight hands between the Puff-Shroom and the zombies. And this actually ends up being the last level that we play of the Frostbite Caves because day 28 is a prepare your defenses level. And in this battle against Gargantuars, the Puff-Shroom are easily able to defeat them, with me only having to worry about the Yeti imps that are launched to the back. And after defeating the Yeti imps, we had now beaten all of Frostbite Caves using just the max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, Lost City, in which we first skip straight to day 4 because the biggest threat we've faced so far appears there, which is the shovel zombie. And as many of you know, the shovel zombie is the biggest threat because the Puff-Shroom literally can't deal any damage to it no matter what I do. So my best strategy to counteract these guys is basically just stalling them until the very final wave, and this level is a good example because the shovel zombies appear in every single lane, and stalling them to the very end ensures that I get every shovel zombie that's in the level. Of course, with the use of the lawnmowers, and this will be our only method in defeating these guys moving forward. Day 6, about halfway through the level, 2 shovel zombies appear in the very 2 bottom lanes, but then the intensity racks up as a second shovel zombie appears in the bottom middle lane in the second big wave. And this actually made it to where I couldn't stall until the big wave actually started coming in, so the lawnmowers went past before the zombies appeared. And very unluckily, a shovel zombie appeared in the very bottom lane, which guaranteed my loss in this level because there's no lawnmower to take it out. So of course, after losing the level, I jumped straight to my second attempt, and this time I knew that the most important shovel zombie to stall was that very bottom one, and we only had to stall the shovel zombie in the bottom middle lane until the second one appeared. So of course I heavy focused the very bottom one, and this time I was able to stall until the final wave, allowing me to take out all the zombies and beating day 6. Day 7 was pretty scary because it started off with a very early shovel zombie, meaning I just have to stall it more, and then a second one approached a little later in the top middle lane, and then a third one in the middle lane, a fourth one in the top middle lane, and a fifth one in the very bottom lane. This was definitely looking hectic, but there's another strategy that you can use in stalling the shovel zombies, which is basically just plant fooding your Puff-Shroom, because that makes it so the shovel zombies can't do anything to the Puff-Shroom. It basically acts as a barrier to their health, and also it doesn't allow the shovel zombies to shovel them up and throw them backwards. But now, as the final wave and all the zombies in it had appeared on the map, we didn't have to stall any longer. And even though it was looking pretty chaotic, we beat day 7 on our first attempt. Day 10, we had a shovel zombie appear in the first big wave, and then a couple more a little later on, but we survived till the final wave and were able to win pretty easily this time. Day 11 only had 2 shovel zombies in the entire level, so again, nothing too challenging. Day 15, there are shovel zombies in the top and bottom lane, but there's also a key there that we have to protect, but in the end, the key actually ended up protecting us against the shovel zombies. And with their help, we're able to take out the shovel zombies without an issue, beating day 15 pretty easily. Day 17 had 1 shovel zombie appear within the first big wave, but then the rest came in basically within the final wave, and the stalling ended up being very easy, so day 17 was beat on the first attempt. Day 19, we actually had a shovel zombie in the very bottom lane getting pretty far, but there was only 2 other shovel zombies that we had to worry about in the level, and as the final wave was sent in, I stopped stalling and let the lawnmowers do their job. Day 20, there's only 1 early shovel zombie in the very top lane, and then 4 more appear at the same time, but they're very close to the final wave, allowing the chaos to be taken out with the lawnmowers. Day 22 is a pretty weird one because it's actually the first time we have to play it in one of these challenges as the Puff-Shroom appears on it, and this time we can actually use the boulder tiles to just take care of the shovel zombies. Even the fire tiles were helpful against some of the shovel zombies, and in making use of them, day 22 was pretty easy. Day 23 was actually a pretty annoying level because of the Indiana Jones zombies who jump right over my Puff-Shroom, but thankfully the first shovel zombie came in within the second big wave, and I ended up not really having to stall at all, and we beat day 23. Day 24, however, was one of the biggest problems within this challenge, mainly because it's impossible. In this level, we have to protect flowers from being trampled on, and of course, that's the worst thing possible because we need to use the lawnmowers to beat the shovel zombies. In this first shovel zombie, I'm able to defeat just by launching the lawnmowers, so that isn't too bad, but then there's 3 more shovel zombies sent within the 3 middle lanes, and they basically just plunge through all the Puff-Shroom, trampling the flowers and defeating me. And this is actually the first level that's impossible to beat with just the Puff-Shroom, but we still have a lot more of the game to put the Puff-Shroom against, so let's keep going. Day 25 had 3 shovel zombies, all taken out by lawnmowers in the end. Day 26 we saw 2 shovel zombies, and they both appeared near the final wave, so it ended up being a pretty easy level. Day 27 was pretty similar. Day 29 sent in 3 shovel zombies in the second big wave, but we didn't have to stall them that long as the final wave literally came in about 10 seconds later, making day 29 pretty easy as well. Now we're on day 30, the last level of Lost City, and it can be a little scary because the back 3 columns are unusable because of the mold colonies on them, which basically just means less time to stall. But thankfully there was only 2 main shovel zombies we had to worry about in those top 2 lanes, which we stalled pretty easily until the final wave, basically guaranteeing our victory. And that was all but 1 level of Lost City beaten using just a max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, the far future, which is a world that we're super speeding through because there aren't any special challenges or zombies that affect the Puff-Shroom. I mean, there are some tanky zombies like the Robo Cone Imp and the All-Star Mech, but the Puff-Shroom can pretty easily handle them. And that was all of the far future beaten using just a max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, the Dark Ages, in which we jump straight to night 5 because it's the introduction level of the annoying Jester zombie. And the strategy to beat the Jester is the same as the shovel zombie, but the Jester actually ends up being a little bit more annoying because I can't plant the Puff-Shroom in a position where it could shoot the Jester, because if any of the shots hit the Jester just throws them back and it instantly kills the Puff-Shroom. So we basically have to stall them at the tail end of the Puff-Shroom. And you can see that if it's just one Jester on the screen, it's basically impossible to infinitely stall it, but as soon as multiple Jesters are introduced, it becomes a problem, mainly because the recharge of the Puff-Shroom just isn't fast enough to keep up. And for some reason, the hordes of zombies in this world come in very slowly, so I have to stall even longer, but this time I couldn't, and the Jesters actually all made it to the lawnmowers. And then, before the final wave was even sent in, 2 more Jesters were sent in the 2 middle lanes, and they inevitably made it to the end, taking me down on my first attempt of night 5. And on my second attempt, I'd completely forgotten where all the Jesters spawned in, especially forgetting if there was any other lanes that had 2 Jesters in them. So this second attempt at the level kind of ended up serving as an information gathering attempt, and as the final wave was sent in, I had all the information I needed gathered. And the most important information was that the top middle lane and the bottom middle lane were the only lanes that had the 2 Jesters in them, which basically means that I don't have to stall the Jesters sent in the very top lane, middle lane, and the very bottom lane. And doing exactly this, I let the middle lane Jester get through pretty quickly, and then as soon as the Jesters were sent in the top middle and bottom middle lanes, I quickly shoveled my Puff-Shroom so I wouldn't make them faster because I needed to stall these 2. And as the level went on, this is exactly what I did, but at the same time, I also had to make sure that I was destroying all of the other zombies so the next horde of the zombies were sent in quicker. Also, like I mentioned earlier, that top lane Jester, I don't need to do anything to and can just let the lawnmower handle it. Of course, still just focusing on those 2 middle Jesters. And you can see there's that Jester in the bottom lane that we don't have to worry about, but then the second Jesters in the top middle and bottom middle lane had now come in. And this basically assured our victory because this was the last of the Jesters and the lawnmowers were going to be able to take care of them. And I already knew from my last attempt that there was no Jesters in the final wave and only Bucketheads, so we finally beat night 5 on our 3rd attempt. Night 7 didn't have any Jesters, so we pretty easily won. Day 9 was definitely another problematic level because it had the Jesters, but also the potions that give them more speed and more health. The health potions aren't much of a problem, but the speed ones definitely are because they make them harder to stall. And I tried stalling these 2 Jesters in the top and bottom lanes as best as I could, but eventually they made it to the end, and so I kind of converted this attempt into an information attempt as well because I was pretty positive that I was going to lose again. And I ended up being correct because the Jester spawned in the top top lane and this bottom middle lane, which didn't have lawnmowers anymore. But my main goal now was to stall until the final wave just to see what zombies the final wave has in it. And very luckily, as it came in, I found out that it didn't have any more jesters. And at the same time, the only lanes I'd have to worry about are that top lane and bottom middle lane, because they're the only lanes with 2 jesters in them. So I lost this time, but jumped right back into the second attempt. And I forgot to mention that the top middle lane also has a second jester in it, so I was stalling this first one, and then as soon as the second one came in, I stopped stalling it. And as the lawnmower was taking them out, I shifted my focus to the jester in the bottom middle lane. And things actually ended up being a little weird and different on the second attempt, but in a good way, because the jesters I expected to spawn in didn't. And I realized that the reason that they didn't spawn in was because in the first attempt, they came in from the necromancy and the gravestones. But I guess on this attempt, I took out the gravestones fast enough to the point where they couldn't spawn in. So taking out this last jester, night 9 ended up being a lot easier than I'd originally expected. But then we're put up against night 11 and this very annoying gravestone in the bottom middle lane right by the lawnmower. And this is another level that ended up being impossible because that gravestone spawned in an imp that I can't destroy using the Puff-Shroom, so it takes out the lawnmower, luckily taking out a jester with it. But then later on, another jester appears in the very same lane, which is what makes it impossible since I can't stall anything for this jester. So night 11 was the second level that the Puff-Shroom couldn't beat. But of course, let's keep on going. Straight into night 12, again, another impossible level because there's no way I can protect these Puff-Shroom in the back from jesters. So of course, we end up losing to this jester in the very top lane that spewed back the Puff-Shroom's attack, making this the third level that the Puff-Shroom couldn't beat. But it got even worse because of night 13, since this is a level that we're playing for the first time in these challenges. And this is of course due to the reason that the Puff-Shroom appears in the conveyor. And the RNG for the Puff-Shroom in the conveyor just isn't good enough for me to even handle the most basic of zombies. So on my first attempt, I ended up losing, and my future attempts made me realize that this level was impossible because I was never going to get enough Puff-Shroom to defeat all of the zombies, making this the fourth level that the Puff-Shroom couldn't beat. Night 16 thankfully wasn't impossible because even though it had jesters, they spawned near the end of the level, and the 3 jesters in those top 3 lanes ended up being the only ones sent in the entire level. So the Puff-Shroom were able to overcome their losing streak and defeat night 16. Night 17 only had 1 jester, and that was mainly due to the reason that we're taking out the gravestones faster than they could spawn in any more jesters. And so night 17 was beaten pretty easily. And now we're on night 19, the last level that we play of the Dark Ages, and it's also another impossible one because we have to protect these magnet shroom in the front from the zombies. And of course, there's jesters sent to their lane, and one of the jesters I can take care of using my mower launch, but the second one I can't do anything about. And eventually it takes out my magnet shroom. And that was all of Dark Ages, not beaten using just the max level Puff-Shroom. But the next 4 worlds should be easier, so let's see how it goes, with next step being the Neon Mixtape Tour and the Jurassic Marsh we're just super speeding through because in the face of the Puff-Shroom, they're actually pretty easy. In these worlds, it's usually the plants that cost a lot that struggle, and since the Puff-Shroom costs 0 and it does a hefty amount of damage, it doesn't really struggle at all. And there aren't any hard counters, so we can just carelessly spam them, taking out all the zombies without a worry. I guess the only zombies we had to worry about were the microphone whippers on the endangered plants level for the Neon Mixtape Tour, since the Puff-Shroom doesn't have a crazy range, but even then the Puff-Shroom were able to handle them. And the Jurassic Marsh honestly was just very easy and didn't have anything that I had to worry about, because even with the Ankylosaurus or the T-Rex with their annoying abilities, the Puff-Shroom 0 cost made them really easy to beat. And that was all of the Neon Mixtape Tour and Jurassic Marsh beaten using just the max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, the Big Wave Beach, a world that's honestly pretty easy for the most part, so we're skipping straight to day 23 where we have to start strategizing a little bit. And the main reason is that we're put up against the fishermen and we have to defend these banana launchers in the back. And of course, the main problem is that the Puff-Shroom only has a 3 tile range, so we have to try to make sure that the Puff-Shroom on the lily pads are preserved. But that goal was very short-lived as a Gargantuar took out the top middle lily pad with the Puff-Shroom on it, so I decided to plant food the Puff-Shroom in the middle lane lane, which also spawned more lily pads in the lane above. And things started looking a little scary with all these zombies being sent in at the same time, but somehow the Puff-Shroom were powering through it, even with the fishermen pulling at them. And we eventually beat the level on our first try. But now we're skipping to the hardest level of Big Wave Beach, which is also the final level, day 30. And it's really nice that the Puff-Shroom costs 0 sun because I can just spam them right away. In some of the previous challenges, I've been struggling because the plants cost too much sun and it's difficult to get them down. But that aside, since this is a similar challenge, our main goal is to try to preserve the Puff-Shrooms on the lily pads for the fishermen. And I was doing pretty well, and the scary wave of the fishermen in each lane was sent in, but I was pretty heavily prepped for them. So we actually ended up beating the most difficult level in a pretty easy manner. And that was all of Big Wave Beach beaten using just the max level Puff-Shroom. Next up, Modern Day honestly has some pretty difficult levels because of course we have to see the jesters and shovel zombies again, and day 7 ends up bringing in the Dark Ages portals, which particularly only spawn the jester zombies, and I was able to deal with these 3 jesters that the portal spawned in. But right as the final wave was sent in, my luck ran out and the Dark Ages portal spawned in the very same lane again, and there wasn't any way I could defend against the jesters, so they ended up taking me out. On the second attempt, I knew to try to stall the jesters even more, which is exactly what I did, and I was able to stall the first 2 jesters until the second portal showed up. And if you can't tell, that jester in the very front is actually 4 jesters in one, and it ended up rampaging through all my Puff-Shroom, and it took out all 4 of them and the 5th one, but very unluckily it missed the very final jester. And then with no alternative path, the jester took me out for a second time. But we were so close on winning on that second attempt that I knew that this level was possible. So I stalled the first portal pretty easily, expecting the second portal in the same lane, but as the final wave was about to come in, the second portal actually ended up spawning in a completely different lane, so the level ended up being a lot easier. And as the last portal faded away, day 7 had been beat. And the next difficult level was definitely day 12, which brings out shovel zombies alongside chickens, and normally these 2 wouldn't be too difficult to stall and beat, but there's another very big problem in the form that I can only lose 10 Puff-Shroom max, and if I lose any more than that, I instantly lose. And the main way to stall is just sacrificing the Puff-Shroom, so it basically counteracts the whole strategy. So of course, I very quickly ended up losing on the first attempt, and for now, I actually skipped this level because I had an idea for it later on. So we're not going to count day 12 as a loss yet, as we will be revisiting it, but for now, we're going to be going up against day 30. Another level that's normally very challenging, but since the Puff-Shroom is 0 cost, has a really fast recharge and insane damage, this level this time actually ends up being very easy. In day 31, the final level of Modern Day has a jester in the top middle lane and then also one in the very middle lane, but those are the only 2, so after we end up defeating them, day 31 and Modern Day had basically been beat, but of course we still had to go back to day 12. And my main reason in doing this was that I wanted to use my coins efficiently and wanted to make sure at the same time that there wasn't any other levels that require coins. And the coins are very important this level because I can buy my plant food, and if you remember, you plant food the Puff-Shroom, they're basically invulnerable like every other plant, so they're able to spray down all the chickens and all the other zombies while at the same time not being killed by the shovel zombies. And it was actually pretty easy to pull off this strategy because I just spam Puff-Shroom and then I would just instantly plant food them whenever I felt like any were in danger. And it got pretty scary at the end because I went down to only being able to lose 3 more plants. But as the Puff-Shroom and lawnmowers took out most of the zombies, leaving only the bottom middle lane, I launched the lawnmower by myself as I didn't want to take the risk. And with that, we had beaten all of Modern Day using just the max level Puff-Shroom. And this also means that the Puff-Shroom ended up losing to 5 levels in the entire game. So it basically tied with the pea shooter and the cabbage pole. Pretty impressive for a 0 cost plant. But with that aside, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and let me know what other plants you guys want to see. Okay, bye bye.